What's up, YouTube? It's early in the morning. I'm still tired, but I've got to get to work. I've got this WRX back in to get the timing belt on, and I'm going to put some new valve cover gaskets in as well. I've got a fuel filter and an air filter. I'm going to end up taking the intercooler off and doing a throttle body service as well. So we got like a full round of preventive maintenance and other maintenance going on. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of get set up and jump right into it. So while I wait for the coolant to drain out, I'll go ahead and take off this upper rat hose, get the fans out of the way, and start taking the belts off. Well, I don't know, either I missed the record button on that one or the battery's starting to flake out on me. But yeah, I got the fans are out, belts are off. Now we want to go about getting whether you call it the harmonic balance or the crank pulley, it's got to come off next. So all we have to do is pull this rear plug out of the back of the engine and jam up the flex plate, torque converter bolt or something, and once it's kind of jammed up, you should be able to crack this big bolt free. So now that all the timing covers are off, we can get the engine to get all the timing marks lined up. So I can just see the line on the timing sprocket for the crank right about here, and on the block it's actually offset from center just to the right, so you kind of want to just slowly turn it so you can see that line up. Then you can come over to the camshaft and actually see how they line up, and you can see the bottom's not lining up at the bottom here, and this one's still not lined up in here very much. We're really close on the crank, and this side looks like it's lined up, so I would say it's just belt stretch. Actually, I could probably almost pull the belt off. So the first one I always go down for is this idler down here. I just crack the bolt loose and take it off. So because this side of the engine is usually under spring tension a little bit, and I mean you can actually get a partial rollover, I guess. So I like to try and jam up the sprockets just by putting in a couple hex bits and jamming the ratchet up against it. So I mean if it tries to turn back, it should stop it there. Because usually over on this side you usually have pretty idled pulleys. You can actually turn them just a tiny bit. Next I'll go about taking this little idler off, and I'm going to try and use the tightest socket I can, because I actually was using my 3/8 sockets and they actually had quite a bit of looseness on them. I don't want to strip this thing. So I'll try with this little quarter ratchet. You can see the pulley's actually got a little bit of heat on it, and the belt has been slipping on it a little bit. So usually at this point I'll just start trying to pull the belt off. Usually just a little wiggle in between this lower sprocket and the water pump, and you can get it to come off. Now I heard a snap over here, and the lower one's moved a little bit, but not too big of a deal. Then just take the whole belt right out of there. Now if you had planned on reusing the belt, say you're doing some other job here, you had a leaking water pump and you wanted to reuse the belt because it only had so much mileage on it, that's no problem. You'd want to mark the cogs of the belt to indicate where they were on the pulley, and it makes setting up the timing a whole lot easier. And mark the direction of the belt as well, which way the motor was running, which way the belt was running. So try and get all these other idlers out. You want to take extra care when working in here. It's so easy to hit the radiator and cause it to start leaking for no reason. It's happened to me in the past. And when loosening these by hand, you got a lot of sharp edges up in here, and they're hard to snap loose, and you can catch the backside of your hand on something pretty easy. We'll go ahead and take the tensioner off. And be careful of this washer on the backside, sometimes it actually falls off. So I'm at the point now I can actually go ahead and take this water pump off. It actually looks like it's been replaced once before. It's a lot cleaner than the rest of the surrounding area. I've got a couple of the small bypass hoses come off at the side here, and to take the lower hose off, and just a bunch of 10mm bolts going around, and it'll pop right out of there. See, I've got the water pump off, and you can see the weep hole has been showing signs of a bad leak for a little while. Probably to the point you could have just kept on adding coolant, but I did find the coolant low, and when I went looking for a leak, that's what I found. So better off just changing it now. I mean, the bearing feels okay, but it's really squeaky every time well, I don't think the microphone will pick it up, but yeah, definitely worth changing. And even these ends are all starting to corrode. Just a potential for the hoses to start leaking. You get a very, very high quality belt. I'm just trying to keep my mitts off of it here. For the money, it's just it's what I'll probably be putting on my wagon eventually if I ever feel the need that I will ever change a new belt on one of my cars. We've got a brand new tensioner. One cogged idler. Two larger smooth idlers. These are GMB bearings, very high quality in my opinion. You get that green seal, you know you probably got GMB. And the cogged sprocket idler, it's an NSK bearing, still high quality from Japan. And a brand new GMB water pump. So before reinstalling the water pump, first we'll take the new thermostat, sit it in there. You want this little dingly guy to face upright. It's to bleed air bubbles through, and any air that may collect in the system, that you want it to, if it builds at the thermostat, you want it to be able to bleed through that hole eventually. So I've got the thermostat housing back on, and the gasket's sitting underneath these two bolts. You can actually take these new paper style gasket and put a little weather stripping glue on them, just that yellow stuff, and dab it on there, and it'll hold the gasket in place for you. Or you can just go about doing it like this. Just take extra care that you make sure that the gasket is completely lined up. So once you got those bolts started, just have the pump loose enough that you can jiggle it. You want to really try and feel the bolt lining up through the gasket and hitting the threads. These tiny bolts are really easy to strip. You just want to take absolute care. You don't need a lot of force on them to tighten them up. Going in kind of a crisscross pattern. Make sure you get everything reasonably equally torqued down. Not something I generally use a torque spec for. They just got to be tight. Now I'm at the point that that's all bolted on, and I'm ready to reverse everything that I just took apart. So I'll start by putting all the hoses back up onto the water pump and start getting some pulleys back on there. So we'll just start by putting in all the new idlers. Actually, this bottom one we'll leave off till we get the belt into place, so we'll just rest it right there. So it looks like these two small idlers are a little different. The boss in there is a little thicker. They're pretty much identical in dimensions otherwise, but the problem is the bolt is perfect length for this one, and I don't have enough threads for that. I can't trust just a few threads, so I'm gonna have to run out and try and get a bolt port. I'm back from the bolt store, and our short bolt is now, I've got a grade 5 bolt to replace it, M8 1.25 thread. It's got a 13mm head now, that's the only difference really, and it doesn't have this flanged area to act as a washer, but it's got the slightly bigger head, so I am going to put it in just like that, and it gives me lots of extra thread. Should be fine. So we'll end with the tensioner, and a couple things. If you're reusing the old one, you're going to have to recompress that push rod and get a locking pin back in there, and you want to make sure that you got your washer on the back side here. So now just go ahead and take the belt. You need to look for all your timing marks. So with the belt placed back down in there, I'll try and just kind of sit it onto the crank and maybe underneath the tensioner. So our crank's actually out because of how loose the old belt was. So we'll just put the pulley back on and nudge it back by hand. Usually once I get the belt in over on this side, I'll take like an old piece of rubber here. I'm using the old thermostat O-ring, and I'll kind of just jam it into the top here a little bit, and it'll just kind of hold the belt in place temporarily while I'm working. So that pulley down there, I mean the bottom ones are very difficult to see. Just be sure that you've got it on there. And just continue putting the belt through. So for right now, I just got the handle of that small ratchet holding the belt up into place for me. I got a lot of tension pulled to this side of the engine, and now it's time to try and line up the exhaust camshaft on the. So once I get it to about this point, I'll try and check that bottom one, because it is difficult to see. It isn't actually sitting right in there yet. But it appears to line up right there. So everything's looking pretty good over here. And as long as I didn't lose anything on the other side, I should just be able to get our idler in place and not worry about having to hold this thing with my hand. Now, because the belt may force down on this idler a little bit, you got to be really careful threading the bolt back in, because it's much easier to cross thread it. So I'll just leave that guy loose for now. I want to double check all my timing marks, and so our crank lines up really well. This intake camshaft lines up really well. The bottom's definitely, the exhaust camshafts down there is definitely lined up. Take this ratchet out, it's just sitting there. We get this. We got that exhaust camshaft definitely lined up. This one here's lined up. Our two marks in the middle are almost touching, and a little difficult to see over on this side, but they are definitely lined up on this side as well. Should be perfect. So first thing is definitely tighten that idler. You don't want to forget it. So we'll tighten all our idlers. So now I'll just go ahead and take off these ratchets. And I'll show you another little trick. These hose clamps that I was showing you for brake lines, these work absolutely great for difficult belts. You can slip them right over top. It'll pinch that belt right on there. So this next step I commonly skip, just due experience. But we're going to roll the engine over and make sure that our marks line up. A full 2 revolutions on our crankshaft to get a whole engine revolution. Where the marks line up again. Here we can see this side lines up pretty good. This side lines up perfectly. Now if you're doing this textbook, you'll rotate this 6 times to get 3 revolutions, and after 3, if everything still lines up perfectly, you almost can't go wrong, unless you got some kind of tensioner failure or pulley failure where you just don't have something tight and then it comes off as you get running the first time. So something else I did notice is this is missing like the deflection shield for the belt, and I just don't. I mean, I've got one on a block sitting outside, but I'm keeping that. So I don't have one to put back on here, nor the hardware. So I'm just gonna have to let him know that it is missing, and if he wants to put one on in the future, then that'll be completely up to him. So at this point in the trade, we usually say this is the moment of truth. So I'm about to turn the key over and we'll see what happens. So yeah, it was a lot of work and a lot of footage to try and stab into this one video, and I'm not quite sure if I've made it all in there yet, but we'll find out. Just got back from the road test and car worked perfect, made great power, no noise anywhere, and there's just a little bit of like coolant and oil residue kind of burning off the exhaust, and that thing's pretty much ready to go. So yeah, if you like the way this video turned out, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Share your comments and questions down below, and I'll see you in the next one.